Hi, geographers. So we're going to conclude our last of our three Semitic Hearth religions. We're looking at Islam today, which is the world's second largest religion with about 1.2 billion adherents. Previously, we examined Christianity, which is about 600 years older than Islam, and it has 2.2 billion adherents and over 33,000 different denominations across the world. And we realize it has a global scope, where some of the last places that Christianity took root are now some of the largest, most population dense zones of Christians per capita. Okay, so we can examine this through the embodiment of Muhammad. Now, I'm not an expert here in comparative religious geography, and there's countless other people who you consult to get a better understanding of these things, as we've already discussed with previous religious geographies. But what I can do is assist you with a conceptual toolkit to get a little better sense of how things came to pass. It took quite a while for Islam to take root through the proselytization of Muhammad. He didn't have many adherents to begin with, and eventually he left Mecca and went to Medina. The religion ended up predominating, though, within the next 100 years under some of Muhammad's generals, such as Abu Bakr. Incredibly vast territorial gains were made, and adherents were converted. Part of this has to do with some geographic explanations. As we looked at the political geography of Rome and the expanse of the Roman Empire, and the linguistic geography of the Grecian, Greek-speaking world overlapping and allowing for this type of mobilities of transmission regarding the spread and proselytization of ideas and eventually conversion rates. So what we can do in a similar fashion is we can look at the spread of Islam and how quickly it moved through a very well-organized former dominion of the Sasanian or the Sassanid Empire of Iran. The Persians had very coherent satrapies, which are various polity or sub-states, essentially provinces within the empire. There were roadways and good infrastructure for the transmission of messages going back hundreds of years. So you also have to think about the terrains as being pretty low population density, except in particular urban centers and around rivers. So you have lots of unoccupied territory, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, where they have the open quarter, which is a desert about the size of Texas. So if you think about how ideas began to spread, they could cover quite a bit of terrain, but not necessarily reach that many people. So if you're going from Arabia, you can reach all the way over to Iran, and sometimes you're not going to encounter the largest swaths of people. But when you did, you could convert entire cities. And then this would subsequently follow along these proselytory pathways that we see similarly embodied some of the earliest Christian apologists and missionaries and various types of acolytes. Okay, so we can look at some military conquests as well. We had the winnowing out of Byzantine territories with things like the Battle of Yarmouk, when you had a lot of auxiliaries who lived in the Arabian area who were loosely Christian Ghazanids, who were loyal, essentially client states to the Byzantine Empire. And they lost a decisive battle in Yarmouk, which essentially erased a lot of the Byzantine territory in Syria, which removed their foothold from the earliest Christian dominions of the Levant. So you begin some of the shrinking phase of the Byzantine Empire in proportional relationship to the growth of Islam. Now we can kind of look at these territorial expansions through these various types of maps and the added territory of these different types of caliphs all the way up into the Abbasid Caliphate, and we can kind of see how far that stretched after the Umayyad Caliphate, which is essentially this entire area. We can then continue to look on into some of these territorial military invasions of India, as we discussed through the ground forces going across Baluchistan and some of these early Islamic invasions, eventually leading into the Mughal invasions of India and largely the dominion of Islamic empires in the subcontinent. We can continue on with some of these movements in the southeast direction, and we currently have Indonesia, which is a prime example of this, which is currently the most heavily populated Islamic nation in the world and the fourth most populous country in the world. And we can kind of see some of these diffusion trends going into the subcontinent and continuing on in some of these oceanic routes into the Indian Ocean, continuing to spread in this way. So we have this continuing to contest with Christian dominions in southern Europe, and we eventually see in the medieval period the rise of the Ottoman Empire And that kind of takes away a lot of the former Byzantine territory, which had been held in Turkey and Greece, and then you see the expansion into the Balkans by the Ottoman Empire, which maintained its rule and dominion in Europe all the way up until World War I for the most part. We currently see some various trends of Islamization across the world, and we see demographic patterns of places like Europe changing to reflect a rise in Islam and sometimes an increasing secularization with a reduction in Christianity. We can also examine different types of trends in the religious geographies of the land. When we look at some of the religious structures, some of the landscapes and different types of the ritual landscapes that we observe when we talk about the Hajj, which is of fundamental importance to some of the tenets of the religion, which revere particular places, which is, again, to go to Mecca and Medina. So we have pilgrimage routes and larger ritual geographies of some of these ceremonial terrains. So this is another aspect to take into account when we look at religious geography and the importance of particular landscapes. This is just very much of an introduction. Please consult me if you have any more questions, and I would be glad to refer you to even better, more astute resources. Thank you.